How can continue to arm Israel's bombardment of Palestinian civilians possibly be justified?
Just to repeat what I think that the Deputy Foreign Secretary has been saying to us today, and that is we have not seen a credible plan for evacuation from Rafah. That is what he has said, and there is currently an incursion into Rafah. Now, if I add those two things up, what he is saying between the lines is that Israel has currently breached the rule that the UK has set.
The situation has escalated, but the government's response remains the same. There are 600,000 child hostages in Rafah alone. There's no proof of life from them, but millions of our people are watching on their phone today the proof of death.
The Minister says that we don't supply that much arms to Israel. Well, if we were to stop the supply that we do supply, wouldn't that send a message that our government abides by and thinks it's important that we follow international law?
Hamas apparently have said to mediators that they do not have 33 living hostages that come into the categories of women, children, elderly and sick. This is an appalling body blow for the relatives of those held captive in Gaza for over 200 days. And will the Deputy Foreign Secretary take the opportunity to acknowledge Israel's right to take military action to get these people home?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right to focus, as she has repeatedly in this House, on the awful plight of the hostages. And she is also right to make clear that under international law, Israel has the right of self-defence to take proportionate action to recover them.
Steve McCabe.
Like many others, Mr Speaker, I pray that pressure from this House and elsewhere can bring this to an end. We all know that will mean agreement on an Arab-led body to maintain peace, order and security. How close are we to that agreement?
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right to try and lift people's eyes to the political horizon so that from this intolerable misery can come hope for the future. There is a great deal of work that is going on in trying to pinpoint and augment the sinews of such a political future. The Foreign Secretary has been repeatedly in the region and especially on the West Bank and in Ramallah, and we will continue to do everything we can to plan for that, along with also trying to resolve the desperate situation in Rafah, where I have tried to set out for the House what Britain is doing.
Mr Speaker, the Deputy Foreign Secretary reminds us we're now in our 7th month here. Talks are not making progress. Hostages still haven't been released, and now border crossings are indeed closing. We are entering another dark chapter in this terrible conflict. And now the UN World Food Programme warns of full-blown famine unless more aid can be delivered. This House is asking what we can actually do. So can I ask the Deputy Foreign Secretary to update the House on the building of that new maritime port off Gaza? This is something that the international community can control, that we can have full stakeholder ownership of. And once it's operational, will British troops be involved in aid delivery?
Well, in respect of his final point, we will have to see what is required. But I can tell him that in terms of trying to secure the temporary pier off the coast of Gaza, that is a way of trying to get additional aid in swiftly. He will know that the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Cardigan Bay is in the area and is effectively the command post for this maritime effort. And Britain, just as we are doing from the air and from land, is also thoroughly and involved and in detail in the maritime effort as well.
Abdul Khan.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government has long warned Israel that an invasion of Rafah must not happen. Civilian lives must be protected and aid must enter Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu has shown once again that he is not listening to his allies or the ICJ and is hell-bent on turning the whole of Gaza into a graveyard. Will the UK government now urgently impose a full arms embargo on Israel in the hope that it is the only thing that UK can do to try and stop the starvation and the potential genocide of those left in Rafah.
In the early part of his question, he did indeed set out what we are all of us trying to address. When it comes to an arms embargo, he will know that the amount of arms that Britain supplies is negligible. But equally, we operate an arms supply regime, an arms sales regime, which is strictly governed by the rules which I've set out to the House before, and we continue to act in respect of the question that he asked me, in respect of the legal advice that we receive, and we will continue to do so.
Tom Hunt.
Speaker, of course I'm greatly concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza right now, but I'm also greatly concerned that anything happens that gives Hamas an increased foothold in Gaza, which puts them in a position where it can inflict more evil and more misery, like we saw on October 7th. I'm also concerned that some of these ceasefire agreements seem to involve releasing hundreds of terrorists, Hamas terrorists, and don't involve all of the hostages being fully released. Will the Deputy Foreign Secretary give me a commitment that we intensify plans for a Hamas-free Gaza, so that people, innocent people in Gaza, can look forward with hope to a future and peace?
He is absolutely right, Mr. Speaker, that Hamas can have no role in Gaza in the future, and much of the work that we are doing in that respect is designed to help build up the Palestinian Authority so that it can be involved in governing both the West Bank and Gaza as soon as the time is right.
George Galloway.
It's precisely the point, Mr. Speaker, that the Deputy Foreign Secretary's answers today are virtually identical to the one he gave, including to me, last Tuesday. The situation has escalated, but the government's response remains the same. There are 600,000 child hostages in Rafah alone. There's no proof of life from them, but millions of our people are watching on their phone today the proof of death and mutilation of many of them. The government say they're doing everything they can, but they are not, because you could now stop sending weapons to the people who are raining down this death and misery. And the Labour Party could actually ask you to, but didn't.
When you say you, it's not me that's responsible. Boris Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the fact that the answers I gave to him, indeed, and to others last Tuesday are the same. And they reflect, insofar as the parameters of the situation are the same, the fact that the policies we are pursuing are long-term and they are designed to tackle the evils that have been so clearly set out this afternoon in the House. He also makes a point about the number of children who are denied food and medicine in Rafah, and he will know that Britain has, through medical aid and through the British contribution, not least through a field hospital, been careful to make sure that where we can bring help, medical help, particularly to children, we are doing so.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's now 214 days since those 130 plus hostages have been held in barbaric conditions, been subject of rape and torture, and indeed denied medical access from the International Red Cross. The sad reality is that Israel put on the table a deal that could have led to a ceasefire right now in return for some of those hostages, but not all, and indeed for the recent Palestinian prisoners who've been convicted in courts of law. Secretary Blinken has described this as an extraordinary, generous offer, yet Hamas refused to accept it. Does my right honourable friend take the view that Hamas have it in their power to accept the position of a ceasefire and the violence and war can come to an end naturally as a result?
The point that my honourable friend makes, one that in different ways has been echoed across the House, is that we must ensure we do everything we can to make certain that these negotiations that are taking place at the moment in Cairo make progress and are successful. And that tonight is what everyone should be hoping can be achieved.
Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to repeat what I think that the Deputy Foreign Secretary has been saying to us today, and that is we have not seen a credible plan for evacuation from Rafah. That is what he has said, and there is currently an incursion into Rafah. Now, if I add those two things up, what he is saying between the lines is that Israel has currently breached the rule that the UK has set. And I don't think he wants to say it here, but that is what I am hearing. So if there is no credible plan to move those people and the attack is ongoing, when can we expect, if not today, an update on the UK's position towards Israel, arms sale and other things that have been mentioned today from this dispatch box?
Well, I have given her the update from the dispatch box insofar as there is an update to give. And she asked me about the words that we are using in respect of Rafah. What I have made clear is that we have not seen a credible plan for military action in Rafah so far, and therefore we are not able to judge whether or not it would be in accordance with international humanitarian law. And that is the point which I have been making to the House.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Israel is our friend and ally, but that doesn't stop us questioning their actions. My right honourable friend today, the Deputy Foreign Secretary, says he wants to see much more aid getting into Gaza. The actions in Gaza over the weekend have only made those miles-long queues of lorries even greater. Air and sea drops are difficult. Will he today, on behalf of the government, appeal to our allies to allow those mile-long queues in Rafah to rapidly go into Gaza and relieve the suffering of the people there?
Well, we continually appeal, Mr. Speaker, for more aid to get in by road. We have made the arrangements through the maritime form of entry and from the air, but getting aid in through the road system and through the entry points is by miles the best way to achieve that. And I said at the outset of my remarks that we were very concerned indeed that no aid got in through Rafah or Karim Shalom yesterday. We are doing everything we can, as we have been since the start of this crisis, to ensure that more aid is getting in, and we will continue to do so.
Emma Wilson.
Speaker, the pro-Hamas network of the press, politicians and protesters are becoming increasingly hysterical in their efforts to stop Israel pursuing those who carried out the pogrom of murder, rape, torture and hostage-taking last October. Does the Minister accept that if there is to be long-term peace in the Middle East, we must continue to support Israel in its battle against Hamas, in defending itself and in pursuing those who are cynically hiding behind innocent civilians today and then tomorrow use those deaths, the deaths of those innocent civilians, as a propaganda weapon?
Well, he makes the point, Mr. Speaker, that Israel does have the right of self-defence, but I'm sure he would accept that that must be exercised within international humanitarian law.
Don Butler.
I'm assuming you're...
Speaker, Minister, what does finish the job mean? With 40,000 people dead, many of them children, is it when every single man, woman, child, baby is dead in Gaza? Is that what finish the job means? The government said that an invasion of Rafah wouldn't be compliant with international law. The Minister says that we don't supply that much arms to Israel. Well, if we were to stop the supply that we do supply, wouldn't that send a message that our government abides by and thinks it's important that we follow international law?
Well, the Honourable Lady, I hope, will accept that the government, while it doesn't publish the legal advice that it receives, it always acts in accordance with it.
Yes. Liz Savile-Roberts.
My constituent Emily Fairs has family in Gaza. Here's her message. We heard from our family yesterday. Half of them have now fled Rafah after threatening evacuation orders fell from the sky. When we spoke to them, they didn't know where they were going. They mentioned Al-Mawasi. but there is no building there for them to stay. It's not safe there. There are no food provisions there. There's nowhere to go to the toilet, nowhere to wash. They are now utterly destitute. Forced displacement is a war crime, Mr. Speaker. His government have it in their power to set up a scheme for people desperate to join family in the UK. If not now, when?
Well, the Honourable Lady sets out the reports that she has received, which are heartrending reports, and that is why the government, with as much vigour and cooperation with our allies, is trying to do those things which I have set out.
Lawrence Escher-Lermy.
Mr. Speaker, the initial Israeli offence in Rafah began last night, and it's been described as limited. An operation is not limited if it results in the evacuation and forced displacement of around 100,000 people. An operation is not limited if it results in all crossing being closed and humanitarian aid being completely halted. We cannot, as a House, downplay the significance of what is happening. The Minister said that the government is doing everything they can, but will the Minister make clear from that dispatch box that the government does not support this offensive and that there must be consequences under international law if it goes ahead?
Mr. Speaker, the government made it absolutely clear that we have yet to see a plan in respect to any military operations in Rafah, but we have always made it clear that any such plans must abide by international humanitarian law.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For months, the Minister has come here and told us the government's asking the Israeli government to do this, the government's requesting that the Israeli government does that. The harsh truth is that Israel is ignoring the UK government. And the truth is that our government actually now needs to act. Words are not enough. We need action to show that there are consequences for breaching international law. Act now by ending arms sales. Act now by suspending the trade talks, because if the government doesn't do what's necessary and take the action to help prevent the attack on Rafah, then isn't it the case that the Israeli government will see it as our government giving him the green light to commit yet more war crimes?
The honourable gentleman will have seen what the Foreign Secretary has said, what the Prime Minister has said, and he will have seen the way in which we are working with our allies, with countries in the region, to try and improve the situation. And he will know, as the whole House knows, that there is no magic solution to this. We have to continue to persist with the arguments and with the logic that is so clearly set out in United Nations Security Council resolutions 2020 and 2028, and we will continue to do so.
Anouk Clézard.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 7 months, I and many of us across this House have come to the Chamber to gain an understanding of what the red lines are for the UK government, but it feels like there aren't many. It felt like it wasn't a red line when babies in Gaza were removed from the wombs of their dead mothers. It felt like it wasn't a red line when children in Gaza looked up to the sky, not knowing if aid or bombs were going to drop on them. And now in Rafah, displaced refugees once again face the threat of forcible transfer. And again, it doesn't feel like this is a red line. Yet given that there's precedent for halting arms sales to Israel, will the UK government finally halt arms sales? And if not, can the Deputy Foreign Secretary please explain to us what is the cost associated to a Palestinian life, and what are the red lines? What does Benjamin Netanyahu have to do that is too much?
Well, the case that she makes, Mr. Speaker, is one that should encourage everyone, the government, but everyone else as well, to do everything they can to bring an end to this catastrophic conflict, which is causing such pain to so many.
Ali Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will start again, as I always do. I condemn Hamas. I think all the refugees on both sides should be returned. But the attack on Gaza has started. The escalation of humanitarian disaster, catastrophe continues in contradiction to international law. Too much hand-wringing has taken place. Too much making excuses has taken place. We have to call what it is. We stand whilst people are starving, while children are dying of malnutrition, while there is no support for the civilians in that area. As the case has been for hostages to be released, what will happen when that Rafah is bombed? What will happen to the Israeli refugees? This is a policy which is doomed from start. Will he call for a ceasefire now and move forward?
Well, he will know that the government has consistently sought a pause so that the hostages can get out and aid can get in, and has worked tirelessly, I would argue, to try and ensure that aid does get in, including inventing new ways of trying to achieve that. And he started his question by pointing out that an attack had started in Rafah, but he will also know that negotiations are proceeding in Cairo, and we must hope that those negotiations are successful as quickly as possible.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask again, with nowhere safe for Palestinians to go and overcrowding in places like Al-Mawassa, where exactly does the UK government think Palestinians displaced from eastern Rafah should go next? And if he has no answer, why does the government's response just remain the same?
As I have repeatedly made clear, Mr. Speaker, we think there needs to be a pause in the fighting which, in the way that I have expressed on numerous occasions in the House, can lead to a sustainable ceasefire.
Kenny McCaskill.
It's not time to recognise that Israel's actions are not a disproportionate response to 7th of October. They are in fact part of a concerted plan to make Gaza unlivable, to extirpate the Palestinian population there, at the same time as they encroach upon Palestinian territories in the occupied West Bank. And as a result of that, is it not time that we ceased arms sales, stopped being complicit in their military actions, reinstated UNRWA raid, and conjoined with other nations in condemning this dreadful genocide?
Well, as I've said to the House before, Mr. Speaker, I do not think it is helpful to use terms like genocide, and I think it's important that the House should recognise that the findings of the court have been misrepresented in that respect. As Joan Dongu, a former president of the ICJ, still serving at the time of the preliminary decision, stated, the ICJ did not decide that the claim of genocide was plausible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister talks about a pause. The United Nations voted for a resolution calling for a ceasefire. The Minister is now talking about looking at military plans by the Israelis in relation to Gaza, when thus far the international community has made clear that there shouldn't be an invasion of Gaza. It feels like the minister's going backwards, and his government has still failed to restore UNRWA funding, which is making the matter and the misery worse, and he has failed to take action to make sure his government supports the implementation of the International Court of Justice provisional measures and the ICC investigation to the occupied Palestinian territories. The Minister has got a good track record in the past, but he is failing us by taking us backwards on this very important issue. When is he going to take action on these specific measures?
Can we really speed up questions that some people aren't going to get into?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't recognise the early part of her question, but let me assure her, as I have in the past of the House, that we are doing everything we can to address the dreadful situation which she has so eloquently articulated.
Senator Beckham.
The Minister's reply on the 17th of April to my written question referred to wanting to, and I quote, see Israel take greater care to limit its operations to military targets. Can the Minister confirm that he is finally aware, therefore, that Israel has not limited its onslaught to military targets, and given the government's own licensing criteria refers to risk that items might be used to facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law or serious acts of violence against women or children, how can continue to arm Israel's bombardment of Palestinian civilians possibly be justified?
She referred, Mr. Speaker, to a number of early incidents which have been condemned, and she will know that in respect of each of those incidents, the government has said that we want an independent and credible investigation and transparent conclusions so that we know why and how these acts took place.